Well, it's Saturday. I know where I'm at. I'm sitting in my chair. It's a little chilly here, getting ready to have a great conversation with my good friend Dewey Freeman. I'm Mark Sylvester. This is the Elder Council. Dewey, good morning, sir.
Good morning, sir, and good morning, everyone. Um, it's so nice to see you this morning.
Knowing that people watch and pay attention and listen, and this touches people. Now we've done this show, for several months now, and getting the kind of comments that people guys write in and say how this has touched them. Um, it raises the stakes, but it also, I think, ratifies our intent from the very beginning, which the way I've explained it to people is if I could come back and talk to my 25, 35, 45-year-old self, what would I say if I would listen?
Mm,
And then to me, the show is that.
I would agree with that.
Because we don't, the other thing that people have been saying is they're so glad they have a couple of elders in their life that they can go to. And we don't all have that. And it got me thinking today, what I'd love to talk about is having that thing that you go to help you in times of trouble, whatever that is, which boils down to, do you have a philosophy, and what is the role of that philosophy in your life? When I say that, what does that trigger for you?
Um, to me, it triggers an underlying foundational belief system that we go to both in good times and also in tough times. It goes to me, it goes to what brings us meaning, what guides us, guides the direction that we're going, and at its core, how do we live with integrity? If we do not have an underlying philosophy that's bigger than us, I believe it's really, really hard to live with integrity and to live with honor. So those are two words that really strike me.
When I look back on, I want to go back to when I was 25, but actually when I was 20, my first divorce. I was pretty young to be married and have a divorce, probably when I was 22, but is in that period. And I needed to find some meaning, right? And I had a good spiritual foundation, but it didn't feel integrated as a thing that could help me, right? Didn't offer me solace. And I found solace in reading. I think I read I'm okay, you're okay.
I
Remember that
remember
book
that
from the
book
70s?
totally.
And uh, while I wish I would have learned how to meditate at the time, that would have helped. But asking the big, I think it's asking the bigger questions of life. That's what it was for me. Because for me, I was in divorce and separation. I know the people listening have everyone has an experience with that. Hopefully, not as many times as we've had.
See if you can cut your times, make them half of our times.
There you go.
That would be major improvement.
That's the deal. It was though at that time that I needed to find something and found things, and I don't remember what they were specifically, but I do specifically remember thinking that there was something bigger than me, and it wasn't about a spirituality or a divine being or anything. It was just there was a larger way to think about life and the world, and here's I'm gonna get to it, Doctor. that it wasn't all about me, because it was all about my role in this larger thing. That's pretty obscure, but that's the feeling. I'm trying to pick on find the emotion I had at the time. I think it was that.
Mhm. Part of what I see happening, and part of clearly what I experience and see as, in my view, a male dilemma, is that we tend to, and societally, we're encouraged to live in isolation and separation.
Huh.
I recently, like 2 days ago, was listening to Joseph Campbell,
Uh,
and from many spiritual and particularly Western Abrahamic religions, there is an underlying premise that we are separate from nature, that
oh.
we rule nature, that we're not part of nature, we're not part of animals. And what that leads to is a separation from ourselves.
Hmm.
What, for me, that leads to is that when we are separated and isolated from ourselves, we cannot be in relationship with ourselves, with other, with nature. Because of that separation, that separation prevents us from having a philosophy by which we can live.
Because you touched on this being, did you say Abrahamic?
Abrahamic,
Abrahamic. So going back to Abraham. So that we're
right? There are three
talking,
primary religions that come out of Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. All come from originally Abraham.
and so that's 2,000-year-old roots, and probably older than that.
Longer. Yeah.
Probably older than that. Um, so that feels very deep. And if that's how that feels that feels more than systemic. That feels in our DNA.
Well, it's taking away from what's in our DNA.
Hmm.
And because our DNA, we are designed to be in relationship. We're designed to be part of something bigger. And let me be clear about what I said about those religions. The underlying roots of those religions are incredibly deep and, frankly, incredibly connected. It's what we have done with those religions that I think is problematic, not the religions themselves.
Right.
Let me be very clear about that. Any philosophy that is really going to support us has to be inclusive and has to be based on relationship. Otherwise, what happens is that we end up being isolated, we end up being alone, we end up not knowing how to relate either to another or ourselves. And that's when we feel incredibly, that's when we don't have any more resources to that allow us to be able to move ahead in life when we really struggle, is when we run out of resources.
There's about 40 shows in your last 5 minutes of talking worth of stuff, important things. And it's that, I guess it's that feeling of utter despair when you feel you're 100%, you're not 100% alone, you're 10,000% alone. You're so
Exactly.
alone that you're driven to commit suicide, right? To say, well, no one's going to miss me because I'm all alone and I'm not connected. And not only how can you even, you don't love yourself for sure. You couldn't kill a thing you love, I don't think.
Right.
And
Right.
so you obviously don't love yourself, which is the basis of all that. And I think about community so much. I think about communing as a chef. I see that
Mm.
breaking bread is a big part of community. It's a part that's gotten lost. Well, you're with fast food and eating in the car and eating on the run. And, I insisted, how many years ago was this now? 30 now, yeah, no, 40 years ago, when my kids were growing up. We all had dinner at the table. Didn't matter what, we have dinner at the table. And that was
Right on.
unusual at the time. The kids said they were the only one in their class that they knew of who had to have dinner, and they loved it, right? They loved
Right.
having dinner. And to me, that's that, you know, 21 times a week we have 3 square meals. We have 3 meals a day.
Mm-hmm.
You have an
Mm-hmm.
opportunity to share and commune with someone. And so being a chef, that's always been a part of me, which is why we like cafes. It's why I like Cafe Society, which is why I like these conversations. Yet what I'm hearing is this idea that we're told to be separate. I want to go back to what you said kind of early on in this conversation, where we're trained to be separate, to be ourselves, to be all of that. Repeat that
Mm-hmm.
for me again, because that feels in direct contradiction to this idea of being communal, which was the point you were making.
Right. What I said was that we're trained as men to be separate and isolated. When that happens, that actually stops or inhibits attachment. What's interesting about what you're saying about food is that there are 3 primary things that allow us to attach: food, which we get in utero and early on in life; touch, which is the community. Sometimes it's physical touch, sometimes it's emotional touch; and movement. And movement is movement of energy through our bodies and or physical movement. When we isolate, when we separate, all 3 of those needs are inhibited. All 3 of those needs are diminished, or the meeting of those needs are diminished. The needs are there. If I have a burger in the car while I'm driving to someplace, there's no community.
Right.
And the food isn't there to nurture us. You also mentioned suicide. I actually last Wednesday had a very close friend suicide. What strikes me with this is that when we're isolated and our bodies are broken, we don't have anyone to pick us up. When our hearts are broken, there's nobody there to pick us up.
Is it that we feel there's no one there to pick us up, or that actually isn't, because I think when you come out of something like that and you're in that dark place, and once you come out of it and you're able to meet with a friend, the friend may say, why didn't you call me? I'm there for you. I've always been there for you. Why did you forget I'm there for you? I find it, I know it's true, but I find it hard to believe that there isn't one person in everybody's life that they could reach out to. Or is it true that there isn't in a
I
lot of
think you're
cases?
I think that your point is accurate, and that there is always somebody there that is willing.
But we this goes back to an earlier show. The story we tell ourselves
The story we
is
tell
that
ourselves, exactly.
I'm not worth it. I don't, well, all the things we might tell ourselves of why I shouldn't call that person, when in fact, when you should call that person because you need some emotional support.
Well, you're correct. When we are separate and isolated, part of that underlying belief system is that there isn't anybody.
Right.
There is somebody. It's just a belief system that there's not. When we do not, oh, go ahead.
So you said we're taught as men, we're told as men. Who's doing that telling, and how can we get them to stop?
That's a really fucking good question.
I mean, that sounds like an information chain that needs to be broken.
That is correct. Parents are doing that telling. Society's doing that telling. Men are doing that telling. Women, and many times, are doing that telling. I've actually recently reread Iron John.
Iron John.
Mm-hmm. By Robert Bly, who, interestingly
just
enough,
passed away.
Yeah. That was a little wild. About a week before Robert Bly passed away, I have no idea why.
Wow, there's a flux in the force.
Yeah, exactly. I went, wow, it's been like years since I've read that book. And, I mean, I was in such a different place, and and so I downloaded it on audiobooks, because when I'm working and cleaning manure, et cetera, I will often listen to something. And the story of Iron John, it's actually way more complicated than I'd remembered. But essentially what happens is that, very briefly, when people would go into the woods near the pond where Iron John was, they would all disappear. Eventually, a man goes in with his dog. The dog disappears, and the man decides to, bucket by bucket, empty the pond. He gets help doing that. One piece that's really interesting and important is he gets help emptying the pond, bucket by bucket, instead of doing it alone. Two is that when he finally emptied the pond enough to find Iron John at the bottom, Iron John got locked up. And Iron John was considered, the words that Robert Bly uses, is wild man. So wild man does not mean unsophisticated. Wild man means open. Wild man means creative. Wild man means strong. Wild man means sovereign. Wild man means knowing nature. Wild man means knowing yourself. Many of our sitcoms are all about men being doofuses. Many of our movies are about men being incapable. Either that, or we go to the other end, where men are invincible.
Superhero,
And
why Marvel is so popular right now.
right. But the underlying, and what that says to me, wrapping back around to where we're talking about philosophy, is that we don't have a coherent philosophy as that builds an underlying structure of who we are as men. We don't have a coherent philosophy that builds an underlying structure of how do we as men find our kindness and our gentleness and our power and our nurturing, our creativity, of how do we do that and how do we find meaning?
So you've given me titles for like 100 new shows, you know.
Okay, well, that's only 2 years worth.
See, I
We
love that
have a
about
lot
you, my
more.
friend. We'll be doing these shows from the hospital bed. How do we find meaning?
That sounds like a plan.
What was going through my mind as I was listening to you was that rather than the person listening right now saying, how do I find meaning, thinking how they would go about anything, they do it on their own. I'm going to go do this on my own, which just perpetuates that I need to go find meaning, which is a bit of a conundrum for us, isn't it? Because we're suggesting, and there was another part when you were saying we're by ourselves, and I don't know why this image of a herd of cattle or wild animals, more wild animals, and the one that gets separated from the herd, it's by itself, and they don't do that. The animals don't allow that to happen. They go and they that's a pack. We're herd animals, right?
Yeah,
And
we're
right.
back. Yes.
That's part of it, and we take care of our own. Side thought for a second. I didn't realize elephants bury their dead. News bulletin, did not know that. So so I'm going to go back to how do we connect to our humanity? How do we remember that we're human? To your point, we're human, we're an animal, we're part of this larger ecosystem. We're not separate. And maybe the first step is just say that. And say that to yourself, and then look around and see what you're a part of and be honest about it to yourself. I wonder if that's a way, if someone is listening right now feeling, I think the word you guys, when I say you guys, I mean psychologists use, is disassociated.
Mm-hmm. Yes, yes. And you're right. You're right. It's like,
I love it when you say I'm right.
well, you're right a lot. So I have to say it a lot. It's true. So you can love it even more.
Thank you.
I honor your love of that. My partner, Kimberly, often talks about concentric circles. And if in this case where you're speaking, if we are the center of concentric circles, it's like, you're right. It's like, how do we look around and find out and actually begin going, oh, what are those other circles? Who is in those other circles? And oftentimes I think as men, we go, there's a circle, there's one, here it is around it. And we don't even have oftentimes a concept that there's concentric circles. And it's like, who is in that next circle out? And then who is in that next circle out? The other piece, which is the deprivation we have from nature, is also isolating. And why I'm saying that is because if I separate myself from nature, if I separate myself from the larger part of who we are, And where we exist, if there's if there's human versus nature, if there's man versus nature, if there's nature versus on and on and on, that's isolative.
Mm-hmm.
So what's interesting is even when we are physically alone, we're never really alone if we allow ourselves to be
Right.
part of nature, which gives us a foundation to begin exploring those other concentric circles. And it are the beings in those other concentric circles that can come and will come.
It's interesting you talk about to me, again, I'm the see what you think guy, so I'm making a picture of this as you're speaking.
Mm-hmm.
And center, and I've actually drawn that circle, so you can tell Kimberly I've drawn that circle.
I will pass that on.
And the way I look at it, there's me in the center of that circle, then my team, so the people
Mm-hmm.
I interact with, and I don't mean in work, just in life. It's my team, my posse, totally. It's my inner circle, right? That's why it's called an inner circle. And then the next circle, I call it the bench. So I can go to the bench when I need to. And then the circle outside of that are the fans. And those are people that are, and I look at the center as being the gravitational pull of my universe is me, my ideas, my energy, who I am that attracts people to me, not being egocentric, but it is egocentric to a degree in the sense that you're aware enough of that your state is what keeps people attracted to you and the energy of that. So if you could think of an atomic energy, you could think of lots of different metaphors come to mind for that. And then when I need some particular thing, some help, I can go to the bench. Hey, I need someone to pop in at the last minute to drain that 3-pointer. It's a buzzer. I don't need them all the time. I just need them for that particular thing. And then you've got the people that you can go out that are fans. And my visualization is being able to pull people from the outer rings in closer and closer. How do you do that? And so park that for a second. So just validating and just agreeing, be a very big yes and to all of that.
Mm-hmm.
Another thought came to mind, though, is if someone can't see those other rings, that's the problem. They're feeling all alone. In fact, they have the rings exist. They just can't see them. So then I'm starting to think, well, how can they not see them? Why don't they see them? Probably a lot of reasons, but then the question is, how could they see them? And to me, it's about elevation then. How do I get up out of myself to be able to look down and see, oh, there's rings, which got me thinking about horizons. And there are these horizons, and we can't see beyond the horizon, yet beyond the horizon is all kinds of new stuff. So if it's just me and my little island, I can't see beyond the horizon to see that there is a team there, because I'm all like this. Man, I wrapped like 7 metaphors inside all that, Doc.
It really was. Now we have 200 shows.
But did that make sense? So it's when it's possibly when you're self-aware, which we've talked about, self-aware enough to know, shit, I'm feeling like an island right now. How do I elevate myself up, climb the tallest tree on my island, and look around and go, oh, I got to go that way. There, I'll rest my case.
The word as you're speaking that comes to me is felt sense.
Felt sense.
Sense.
Oh, tell me about that.
When we cannot see, so again, purely metaphor, I'm like I paint pictures in my mind too.
Yeah.
When we cannot see, the sense, so here's a really interesting piece. The senses that we actually allow ourselves to actually use and activate are primarily, with the exception of touch, are all in our head.
Okay, keep going.
Eyes, ears, nose, taste. Yep. So this is on our head. These are on our head. These are on our head. These are on our head. We can touch with our hands. We can also feel touch with our face. Part of the isolative process is to live here.
And only there.
And only there. Felt sense, which is part of what's called our neuroceptive system.
Which is why our improv coach tells us you need to get out of your head.
Now stop friggin' thinking. Like even in, I played tiny bits with improv since you and I started talking. But even in therapy, I rarely think. I mean, it's there. I mean, I have that knowledge. And it's like, what's happening here? What I know.
Why do we? Why is that so goddamn hard to do?
To feel here.
Yeah.
It actually is not hard to do. We've just been trained not to do it. We have been trained because we have a prefrontal lobe to use this instead of this. Every other animal in the world uses this. And that's part of the isolation. When we isolate, separate, dissociate here, this is dissociated from here. We lose way more than half of who we are. And you're right. We can be down in this hole and go, I can't see out. Oh, here's the top of the hole. But we actually can feel out. We can have
Tell me more about that.
Well, we can have a sense of what's in those other concentric circles. We have felt those throughout our lives if we allow ourselves to. And we feel that all of the time. We just pretend like it's not useful. You walk into a room and go, oh, wow, this is really cool. Sometimes we walk into a room, it might be the exact same room, but maybe a couple of different people in it. And we go, ooh, this feels a little creepy. And it's like, but we don't listen to that. We don't allow ourselves to listen to that.
Okay, I want to back up just a tiny bit, because that made me think about being intuitive, and people who are intuitives have this this enhanced sense of feeling. It's an easy way to talk about it, I think, right? My intuition is, so I'm in touch with the way I feel. Something energetically has got me feeling off. I don't know what it is. And as men, we tend to not, I specifically remember a guy saying, when you have that feeling in your gut, like you have a gut feeling about something, he said, that's bullshit. All that means, he says, all that means is you don't have enough information yet. So you need, when you have a gut feeling, you need to get more information than that feeling to go away. And that was an offhanded comment at a board meeting that I'm sure he forgot and I've never forgotten. And it's to that point where it's, no, I'm going to listen to my gut.
Right.
Right. Isn't that what we're saying?
That's exactly what I'm saying. And truth is that women are actually encouraged to listen to their guts more. Not all women.
That's where I was going to go, because you started this whole thing off with it, as you said, as men were trained.
Yes. My underlying, very strong core belief is we all are intuitives. We all have the ability to do that. We all have that. That is a part of who we are.
That came with the package. We just
That
haven't
came with the package.
that we just haven't figured out how to unlock that.
Well, we knew how to unlock it when we were born. We
Hmm.
just learned to lock it up.
I need a
And-
key, Doc.
Yeah, which is interesting. This is going back to Iron John. The key to the cage is under the mother's pillow in the Iron John story. And what's interesting to that, about that, is it isn't that we want to not have our mothers, it's that what we want to is to be able to add our fathers.
Say that
And to
again.
add. It isn't that if we need to get the key out from under our mother's pillow and unlock our own lives. So it isn't that we want to not have our mothers or the relationships there. It's that what we're trying to do and need to do is bring in our fathers, bring in men, bring in men's intuition, bring in men's feelings, bring in men's wholeness. It's not a one or the other. But we as baby boys and toddlers are taught not to stay with our intuition, not to stay with that gut feeling. We're taught that. Well, your knee's okay. Just get up.
And your body's saying no, 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 no.
And your body's going, oh, it really hurts. You're okay. Stop crying.
Okay, so this. What I love about philosophy is that the kind of thing you can scratch that for the rest of your life. We could both go off the rest of our life, never talk to another person, which would be wrong, and contemplate and study on this. However, I like to apply things, and I'd like someone to be able to understand what question might they ask themselves to realize they're down. I love the visualization. I'm down in this well and I need to go up, and I can feel that sense. So what question might they ask themselves? This kind of gets back to a little tip we could leave our listener.
Right.
And once they're up, and this is, I think this is a muscle that could be, feels like we have this muscle, we've just not exercised it.
Absolutely.
In general, most of us, a very generalized statement, some have more. So once we've done that, how might, there we go, there's the question, how might we exercise that muscle so we get better at it? It being the mind-heart connection.
Two very, very simple things. One is to breathe. Yeah, that. What you'll actually notice is many times before I talk about or say something, I have taken a breath or two. It's like, and then whatever. One is breath, because breath actually goes, an inhale goes from our head into our body. Many times what we do is breathe just enough to stay alive. We're not breathing enough to live. So it literally, energetically, breath begins, comes in through our mouth, goes into our body, then comes from our body, out of our mouth or nose. So it's head to body, body to head, head to body, body to head. Breathe. As you breathe, we have 3 diaphragms. diaphragm that's right at the base of our mouth. You move your tongue up and down, you can feel it. We have our diaphragm that's right at the base of our lungs, and a diaphragm that's right at the base of our pelvis, called the perineum. As you're breathing, relax all three of those. Work on that. Our perineum is connected to our mouth, believe it or not. And there's actually a tube that goes through our entire body called our throat or stomach, our small intestines, and our large intestines. It goes right through. So breath, one of the biggest things I can tell, like when people are holding their ass really tight by looking at what's going on with their jaw. If their jaw is tight, their ass is tight. If their jaw is relaxed and their tongue is relaxed, their ass is relaxed. There has to be relaxation in those processes for energy to move down through your body. So that's one. Two is awareness. When we're breathing, just start being aware. What's it like walking into a room? What's it like when you just took a bite of that sandwich? What's it like when you're standing next to somebody? What's happening in this lower, from your neck down? You don't have to do anything with it at this point. Just start being aware that that's there. Once we become aware, we will begin changing. Awareness is about 60 to 70% of change.
So start by probably just sitting quietly. Relax these three diaphragms as you're taking breaths and being aware that just the simple awareness of those three, right? That would be a start, right? I know this when I meditate at night. Part of it is just relaxing, and he talks about relaxing from the head all the way down, but it's basically the same thing you're saying. And I can feel my body actually, like, I think I'm relaxed, and I can relax a little more, and I can relax a little more. I can relax a little more. And let's just start there, baby steps.
Absolutely.
And then make that a practice.
Make that a practice. And when you relax, just be aware. You don't have to change anything. Just be aware of what happens. And it's not, if you can make the breathing and awareness, those two things, part of your lifestyle, your life will change.
Straight up.
Straight up.
Dewey Freeman, I want to let that sentence linger in our listener's mind, because that is what's so interesting is that all of this ends up with two simple words, which could change everything. Dewey Freeman, thank you so much, my friend.
Thank you, sir.
I love this.
I love this too.